Us. Hi, I am Megan Owens. I'm the Director of Transportation Riders United. Pleased to host our latest Transit Tuesday talk. This series works to bring uh, transportation leaders and decision makers together with riders and advocates in the public to really make sure everyone understands what is happening in transit and related spheres and how can we help make it the best it can possibly be. So we are we're actually going to be talking more land use and zoning policy today than transportation, but as everyone here I'm sure knows, these things are closely related. So, um, as you were probably notified, this is being recorded. Um, and in addition to myself, Zanaya Kelly and Petra Mihalko are from the True team and will help answer questions in the chat. If you have any challenges or issues or questions that you just want to pose, please do feel free to use the chat. In fact, I will encourage everyone to share in that chat the uh, to do a quick introduce yourself and have you dealt with city planning before? How much experience or lack thereof, all the way from what the heck's a city plan to I've written some, and I'm sure we have the range on here. So love to. Uh, as much as it's being on Zoom isn't always the most fun, we can absolutely use things like the chat to engage more. So, um, I am excited to introduce Dara O'Byrne, who is really leading a lot of the city planning, the Plan Detroit efforts as oh, I forgot my notes. As the deputy planning director for the city of Detroit. Excellent. And Dara and I go way back. We had toddlers in preschool together, so who are now starting to drive. So, um, so it's wonderful to see you, Dara. Thanks for joining us. Um, and Julie Konecki, and who is also one of the critical planners for Plan Detroit and the city of Detroit. So I am in fact going to pass it off to these lovely ladies to let us know uh, what the heck this planning process is, where we are in the process, and then ultimately, how does that impact transportation?
Great. Thank you so much, Megan. It's wonderful to see you. I was telling Julie about how we go way back just earlier today. So we are super excited to be talking about Plan Detroit. This is the city's master plan of policies update, and it hasn't been updated really since 2009. So this really is a unique opportunity for you all to engage in this process and give us feedback, and then stay engaged throughout the process. So tonight we're going to give you a little bit of a background about what we've been up to, and give you some of the things we've learned along the way through this process, and then where we're going with it. And we'll go through a timeline and things like that. So next slide. So we get this question a lot. What is a master plan? We do currently have a master plan. As I said, it was last updated in 2009. And most cities, if not all cities, have a master plan that lays out the future vision for the city. We like to say that it is a decision-making tool for the future. So next slide, I'm going to break that down for you a little bit. Um, it's a decision-making tool for us at the city, but also for residents, for community members, for business owners, and everything like that. But it really helps us identify, you know, how do we create the future that Detroiters want? What type of development or quality of life improvements belong where? think we all recognize that we can't have a one size fits all approach to both how we make decisions and the type of kind of tools and implementation that we use throughout the city. So this allows us to have really clear strategy for how we're making decisions and why we're making decisions. Which policies best support our land use goals? So when we're, setting up our policies, is it helping us achieve that broader land use, the broader land use goals that we have? And how should we plan for capital improvements? And when we talk about capital improvements, those are those kind of physical on the ground improvements like transportation, like road improvements, like transit investments. How do we make sure that we're all making decisions together toward a shared vision and a shared future? So that leads to the second part of this. It's really for the future. The master plan is really talking about the things we build and invest in over the next 20 years. It's a long range policy document. And I heard Megan talk about zoning at the beginning of this. The master plan helps inform zoning, but it's not zoning. It's a little bit higher level because it's policy, but it will help inform zoning and should be aligned with zoning. Next slide. So, how do we even go about doing kind of the citywide long-term vision and create a plan? So we start by studying key opportunities and challenges for Detroit's future. And that's both a combination of kind of data analysis and really digging into understanding what's happening from a data analysis standpoint. But it's also really learning from you and our community members to ensure that residents are really shaping the policies that reflect our community's needs. And we're making sure that we're coordinating efforts with business community, with government agencies, interdepartmentally within the city, but also outside the city. So the state, SEMCOG, county, and community leaders to make sure that we're all working to achieve the same vision. Next slide. So the master plan of policies is covers a lot of different topics that the city works on and works to impact. But really, it's centered around land use. So how do all of these different topics relate to land use? So our arts and culture, mobility, including transit, but also including biking, walking, driving, city systems, jobs and economy, neighborhoods and housing, and open space and environment. So we're going to be looking at all of these things with a frame or a lens around land use. Next slide. So we have been working on this since early 2024, and we are hoping to have a draft in around Q2 of 2026. So how do we get there? So we spent quite a bit of time on the analysis and visioning part of this work, including a lot of community engagement and that data analysis I was talking about before. We are solidly in the draft policies phase of this work. We had a series of policy workshops in the spring and are gearing up for another round of district by district engagement this winter. So we're kind of right there in the middle of this draft policies phase. And then once we get through this phase and are able to incorporate all of that engagement and technical analysis and bring it all together, we're really looking forward to having a draft plan in early 2026, followed by open houses and finally a public hearing. Next slide. This is where I hand it off to Julie to talk about some of the things we've learned in terms of the kind of realities facing Detroit today.
Great. Thanks so much, Dara. I am Julie Konecki. I am the project manager for PDD, overseeing the master plan. And I'm going to go kind of quickly through what we learned and what we've heard. We call these our realities. They're the things that we want the plan to address. So starting with overall population trends. Many of you probably know we've had 2 years of consecutive population growth for the first time in decades in the city of Detroit, which we're really excited about. Um, that said, many areas still lack the critical density we need to support services and amenities, services like transit in particular. So only about 10% of the city's block groups exceed the minimum threshold that we would want to see in terms of density to support high frequency transit and vibrant commercial corridors. So this is something that's going to be, I think, critically important when we talk about land use policies and our recommendations around kind of land use on the map, to make sure that we're working towards building up that density that we need to support these kind of things that residents want and deserve. At the same time, going along with those population trends, we're about a third of the size that we once were at our peak population in 1950. However, our infrastructure and the amount of land that we have to maintain remains exactly the same. So we have this situation where we have extensive aging infrastructure and fewer resources to address what we would like to say are competing needs. I think some neighborhoods are growing and or maybe even we're facing challenges around climate change and need infrastructure upgrades, while others have more capacity than we need, and we need to be really focused on maintenance. And there's only so many dollars to kind of balance all of those different priorities. Something we heard in our community engagement is that water and sewer issues are really top of mind for folks, as well as neighborhood resiliency, especially around issues like flooding. So this is also going to be kind of a critical policy issue as we start to draft our policy recommendations. We need more jobs. This is probably that none of these should shock you. I think that that's kind of the thing that we constantly say is these should hopefully be obvious to everyone that what these findings are, because they should be leading us to kind of shared priorities. So we need more jobs, especially for Detroit residents. We're experiencing a commuter swap here in the region where almost like the same amount of people go out into the suburbs from Detroit for work as come in from the suburbs to Detroit for work. So people are just passing one another on the freeway or on the bus. That is kind of a challenge. And we also are seeing that 49% of Detroiters that are of workforce age are not even participating in our labor force. So when you compare that with broader economic trends that are showing even our most stable and large industries as relatively flat in terms of growth, we have a critical situation where we need to be providing more jobs. We want more Detroiters employed here within the city. And then from a transit perspective, we are going to keep this challenge of needing to make sure Detroiters can get to work and suburbanites can get here as well for work. We have more work to do to make our transportation network work well for all users. I think the folks on this call are very familiar with some of the stats on this slide, that almost 20% of Detroit households don't have access to a vehicle, and high frequency transit service does not reach nearly as many folks here in the city as it could. But there are also shortcomings across kind of all different modes, whether that's walking. We have a high rate of pedestrian fatalities, whether that's biking. We have kind of a fragmented, incomplete bike network here in the city, as well as trucks. Detroit just established kind of our first policies around formal truck routes just in the past month. So we really want to look at the transportation network holistically here. Yes, transit is an important piece of it, but we want to make sure we're understanding modal priorities across the city and addressing points of conflict where they might exist. On the housing front, we have kind of a dual challenge here. Low incomes and changing needs are both part of our affordable housing challenges that we're seeing in the city, as well as our housing demand needs as well. So this just requires more diverse housing solutions. Low median household incomes continue to be a major driver of affordability, while changing household composition is a major driver of what type of housing we need. So we need to think of kind of both sides here of the coin when we're talking about what type of housing do we need and at what price point. I think we're seeing a need in a lot of different areas for a lot of different folks that the plan will need to respond to. This, I will just point out, quality and affordable housing across both phases of community engagement we've done so far was the number one issue that residents wanted to see the city address. Making kind of a pivot here into a bright spot. Detroit's arts and culture has really emerged through the conversations that we've had with residents, particularly our young people, as a source of civic pride that they want to see more celebrated. There's also a growing body of evidence that our consultants have drawn out that this is an opportunity for economic growth that's perhaps a little bit untapped right now. So this encompasses everything from our large cultural institutions like the DIA to major sporting and concert events downtown to the kinds of local, smaller artists and creators that are doing great things all across the city. And finally, this one's not really rooted in data. This one is all driven by feedback that we've gotten both from community members as well as staff and people who are trying to make things happen here in the city of Detroit. It is hard to build, create, and do business here. This is probably the number one thing that we hear when we talk to people, whether it's about, I don't understand how to purchase land in my neighborhood. I don't really understand the development process or the business licensing process. Why does it take so long to do anything here? So this was another one that folks really wanted to see the plan speak to in some way. So how do we start to address these realities? So I think first it starts with setting an overall vision and what we are calling our values or our guiding principles for how we're going to execute that vision. But then also setting some really tangible, actionable goals to act on those realities and achieve the vision. We're at a stage now that we are kind of putting forward our vision and value statement. This was built on lots of community feedback that's happened over the past year. Some folks that participated in our policy workshops this April also got a chance to provide kind of a set of revisions to our first draft. But our overall vision is Detroit will be a city of choice and opportunity. I think when it comes to transit, I see transit kind of fitting in both of those things. The choice to get around in however manner it works well for you. The city is providing you options. Opportunity, do you have access to jobs, to like getting to amenities in your neighborhood, to high quality city services? I see kind of transit really fitting neatly within this vision statement. The accompanying vision statements, I just want to highlight here. Something that was really important to residents when we spoke to them is that we didn't want the vision statement to ignore the great things that are already happening here today. As many people told us, including a lot of young people, Detroit is a vibe and we want to celebrate that first and foremost. But when you love something, you can also, be really, the way you love something is to really work hard to change it. So that is kind of what the second paragraph speaks to, the work ahead. How do we make a great place even better? These are the standards, these are our values that we're going to push forward with to execute on that vision. Resilience, equity, innovation, collaboration, and legacy. Like with the vision statement, there's kind of a short summary version for each of these values so you can kind of get the gist really quickly, as well as a more expanded definition that encompasses more of that wider feedback that we received. So, our goals for the plan are very short list of goals that we drew intentionally because we wanted to be really laser focused on an achievable set of goals. And when we say achievable, that's not to mean that they're not also aspirational. So first and foremost, include improve quality of life at every neighborhood. Second, grow and strengthen Detroit's economy. Third, focus density to support services and amenity. And fourth, make it safer and easier to get around. So these are the things that we are going to be working on advancing through policy and through our land use recommendations in the coming months. They're always going to be coming back to how are we going to act on these goals to achieve our vision. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Dara to speak briefly to where we're at now and a little bit about the road ahead.
Great, thanks, Julie. So as I mentioned when we were talking about the schedule, we are solidly in that draft policy phase of work. And it also includes kind of our place type work. So the policies are what we talked about are going to guide decision making, and we're going to be mapping our place types on a map that actually show areas of the city that align with different policies. As I mentioned, we know that we can't have a one size fits all approach to all the different areas of the city, to different neighborhoods, to different land uses. So the place types are really going to help us both set a vision for what we want to see in that place, and then there's going to be associated policies to get us there. This work is really being shaped by the policy workshops, where we had nearly 500 people participate, and our youth summit. And then we're doing a whole bunch of stakeholder interviews, like this meeting today, where we really wanted to make sure we were hearing from transit riders or transit advocates. To help shape this phase of work. And then we're going to be going back out to district by district to kind of share drafts as they become available. Next slide. So to specifically address you all in terms of your specific interests around transit, we've talked a lot about land use, and that while the plan is centered around land use, as Megan really teed this up, land use and transit, land use and transportation really go hand in hand. So we're going to be looking at places where we need transit connections most, in particular highlighting where there may be mismatches in current or planned service. So if we're looking at a place type where we really see a lot of density going, but it currently doesn't have our highest capacity transit, how can we shape policy to make sure that those higher density areas are being well served? We're also going to look at identifying strategies to support transit from the land use perspective. So not just aligning transit to existing land use, but we want to make sure that land use and that density of people is working to support the opportunity to have even higher capacity and more efficient transit. When we have kind of spread out folks, we know that it's harder to serve by mass transit. So promoting density, creating transit-oriented design are just some of the things we'll be looking at and thinking about in terms of being able to better support our transit system. And then we're hoping to build consensus around priorities to give transit agencies better guidance as they work to improve operations. We aren't necessarily getting into the detail of recommending operational changes because we're staying at the policy level. We're staying higher level, but the policies will help inform the department heads or the managers that are making those operational decisions and strategies, and as they're working on the more programmatic side of things. So with that, I think I will pass it back to Julie just to facilitate. Yep.
Yeah, and so I've tossed our contact information up here on the screen as well as our website, plandetroit.com. That's the best way to stay in touch with the master plan as well as our newsletter. So we've got the QR code up here. It's also available to subscribe on our website, or there is a text to subscribe option here as well. You text Plan DET to 844-293. 1374. We can toss all this info in the chat for you. If you want to keep in touch with this process, if you're a City of Detroit resident, sign up for our newsletter and please come out to our district engagements coming up here in a couple months. If you're signed up for the newsletter, you'll get all the information on where and when we will be in your district. And you can come out and give us some even more feedback on further developed policies and some of these maps that Dara has been talking about. For other folks who are from the region, this is a great time to highlight some, ask your questions, but also share some of your priorities or things that you'd like us to consider as we start to draft these planning priorities. Keep advocating for regional cooperation in the municipalities that you're from, because that also helps us do our work. With that, I'll stop sharing my screen. I can always put this info in the chat, but I think some folks from True are going to help facilitate questions and conversation.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing. It is kind of nice when the research and the kind of ground truthing really do align with what people already understand and experience. It is important both to kind of talk to people and hear perspectives, but then also to look at data and metrics and trends and such. So I really appreciate how you are really working to incorporate both of those. Um, I know that one of the biggest challenges from the transportation components are in some ways we have really wide roads, and yet there is a limit in how much space there is. Will you be getting into safe streets type or um, multimodal design types of issues, talking about how we better utilize the streetscape, or is this mostly about the land use outside of the streets?
So I'll start with that one. As you noticed, one of our really, one of our goals is really focused on making it safer for everyone to get around. And that means, we will have policies that will work to implement that goal. With that said, we aren't going to be designing like specific streets or, coming up with really specific like street by street recommendations. The policies will guide the work that DPW is going to be doing. I understand DPW is going to be updating their kind of uh, their transportation plan. The goal is that the master plan will help guide that work that they're doing to then get much more specific about typologies and standards for bike lanes and standards for sidewalks and things like that. But we will, the master plan will be more focused on setting the policy that informs that kind of planning work that they'll be doing. Julie, would you add anything?
The only thing I would add is that part of, the early phases of work for this process involved reading and understanding
Yeah.
all of the different city-led plans that are out there, including DPW's Streets for People and DDOT's DDOT Reimagined plan. And I think part of the value of the master planning process is that planners are really good conveners and we're really good big picture thinkers. And so we were able to at the outset of the project, and I think at other times as we move forward, bring these two folks together and say DPW is trying to do complete streets and kind of establish what mode is the priority on these different roads. And then DDOT wants to make sure they can move their buses efficiently. Like, how do we kind of talk to one another so you guys can do your planning, and then how do we fit in as master plan? So we're definitely, I think there's also value in just even having those conversations, even if the master plan is not going to be leading the way necessarily on the specifics of the roadway design.
Yeah, that certainly makes sense. Again, there's the city government is a
Yeah,
large entity. What does the city think about X or Y?
yeah.
Depends on who you ask and when. So no, that and I really appreciate that you are starting with what's already there. No point in reinventing the wheel when there are
Mhm.
so many previous plans and studies and such. Um, Josh asked, is there another city's planning strategy that Detroit would like to emulate? Obviously, every city is different, but are there, maybe I'll tweak that to say, are there components or aspects of other cities' plans that you think could be informative as as you put together the plan?
I'll take this one because I
Yeah.
think there's one really obvious one that we talk about all the time, and that's the city of Charlotte. And it's particularly because they have an equity-based approach to their master plan. I also think they have a very clear way of laying out their goals and their policies and their place types. So it's not information overload. Every little last thing a city could be doing is in their master plan. They're really focused on their core vision, their core goals, and executing on that. And then they pair it with really smart equity metrics that help them track their implementation progress based on how well we're improving access to essential goods and services, how well we're improving access to affordable housing and such. And also just the exercise of looking at data through an equity lens is something that we have already been emulating in kind of our deeper dive analysis in this phase of work.
That's really neat. That's really great to because we do have such a breadth of Detroit is so many different things, and ensuring that there are substantive benefits for every part of the city, for everyone is excellent. Um, you noted that you're not explicitly getting into zoning issues. Uh, I have seen policy, I think it's what would be considered the policy level, um, that that communities around the country have taken on of either um, eliminating parking minimums, not requiring developers to include a specific amount of parking spaces in order to be allowed to build more than they feel like they need, or things like I was just in Minneapolis and I believe that they have eliminated single family only zoning, to say anywhere in the city you can do at least a little bit of growth. Are the are those policies under consideration, things either in the parking or in the uh, shifting away from being so single family exclusive? Are those things that are under consideration?
So I'll take the first stab, and then Julie can feel free to jump in.
Didn't
So a
think
lot
if we
of
were only going to give you easy things, were you?
I know, I know. No, these are all. I mean, we're planners. These are all things we think about all the time. So it's like kind of a two-part answer. One is those are all zoning questions, or things related to or that would be implemented through zoning. But the master plan sets policy that can inform zoning. So, and they should be aligned. I will say that the phase that we're in right now is starting to establish some of those policies. So we don't have specific policies established yet. Um, I will say from all the feedback that we've gotten to date, and based on the data analysis that we have, and based on kind of the way we're thinking about growth and density is that it's likely not going to be a one size fits all anywhere in the city. Because unlike, a lot of other cities that are just experiencing exponential growth pressure, we still have large areas of the city that aren't experiencing that growth or that density. And so they need different policies than an area that is. And so that's really been a lot of what we've been talking about. And we do collaborate really closely with the City Planning Commission staff. So again, we've talked a lot about, the city and all the different people involved. City Planning Commission staff have been leading the Zone Detroit update. And while it has taken longer than I think they or anyone would like, it has allowed us an opportunity to kind of get caught up and have the opportunity to lead with policy. When they launched Zone Detroit, the only policy they had was the 2009 master plan, which I think we can all agree Detroit has changed since 2009. So now there's an opportunity to really use the master plan and what we're learning to help better inform that process and how we can be more strategic in that implementation.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is I think Dara, everything Dara said, I think covered it. But I think what the master plan will hopefully do is signal where those types of policies might be appropriate.
Yeah.
So it's probably not all over the place, reduce parking all over the place, increase uh, housing or loosen housing rules so we can add more housing. I think we want to be really grounded in data and also what we're hearing from the community about where that's most appropriate. And then that signals to CPC, hey, this is where we really want to go all in on these zoning policies when you update the zoning ordinance.
Absolutely. No, definitely. You've got so many different things to take into consideration. One of the things that I think anybody who's uh, been at a public meeting or let alone run one has knows is that there are a lot of different visions of what people want, sometimes often in the same neighborhood. Um,
Mhm.
and there are people who I live in the Bagley neighborhood, and there are people who are like, oh my gosh, that uh they narrowed Livernois down and now it doesn't function at all. I'm like, and other people like me who are like, I love that I can take my kids biking down Livernois and we can walk around in these big beautiful sidewalks. And yeah, it takes a little bit longer to get through. But how is there a specific way that you try to balance differing pressures to either we don't want anything to ever change or we want to be the next Chicago. How do you juggle those different pressures? And before you get into that, I will invite everyone to please share your questions. I can pick their brains all night, but we want to make sure you guys have a chance to have a chance to both ask your questions and share your perspectives. So yeah, how do you juggle very differing pressures?
So I think it is challenging, particularly doing a citywide plan. But what we try to do, and we're going to continue to try to do, is again, pair the data with what we're hearing from the community and do our best to bring those things together so that the plan is based in the realities that both the data is telling us and that people are experiencing. And that is why the vision, values, and goals are so important. And we spent a lot of time on it. And we like rechecked with the community and brought it back out. We iterated on them because if we can agree on the vision of what we're trying to achieve and those values and the goals and how we're going to get there, when we have those kind of but I wanted this and you wanted that. It's like, well, how are either of these things helping us to get there? But I also think it's why we talk a lot about it's not a one size fits all. And there is opportunity for strategic priorities and strategies for different areas. Um, because I think that comes out as well with when you're working with community. And then finally, what we try to do is we try to remind folks that um, the master plan is different than the neighborhood plan, where you can get really specific about the unique characteristics of this specific neighborhood and the specific needs of that neighborhood. We are trying to bring everybody back up to what are we trying to achieve as a city as a whole, which is difficult. But I think if we can get there where we're all in agreement about what it is we're trying to achieve, it makes the decisions easier. But that is the hard work.
Absolutely. There's a lot of differing opinions. Uh, Speaking of a kind of a varied approach, Mary Jo was wondering, definitely one of the issues that has come up in a lot of past plans. What do we do with the open space? And you noted that there are some neighborhoods, some communities where the infrastructure is being taxed because there's so much pressure, but then you have other communities where there might be three old grandmas living on that street and it's critically important for them, but they've got a whole lot of open space around them. Are there strategies that are being considered uh, to support and respect and address some of the open spaces?
I can take this one, Dara, because
Mhm.
you've said one size fits all a lot, and now I'll say it. So like everything else, it's not a one size fits all approach. So we want to understand the needs of the different I'll say neighborhoods, but it could also pertain to other areas of the city, like our commercial corridors, for example, or some of our light legacy industrial areas. So really understanding how much vacant land there is, what the unique needs of that place are, and then responding with an appropriate strategy. I don't think we're going to get so hung up on the details of like every fabulous creative idea that could be done with vacant land. I think there are tons of those ideas out there, and I'm sure our residents have even more to offer. It's more about on a spectrum of potential uses, is development likely here? Is development needed and likely here? Then let's signal that that's maybe the best approach to vacant land in other areas where the development pressure is just not there. Let's open it up for a conversation about, what other needs might be present. Does it flood a lot? Is it really hot? Um, some of those kind of resilience or even public health concerns can kind of guide our strategies there. And in other places, maybe it's simply about beautifying neighborhoods that's really important. So it's more about what is the thing that we're trying to achieve there? Are we trying to, add density, add development? Are we trying to beautify or reduce harm in a neighborhood? Those are the types of things that'll guide the vacant land strategy, and they'll be by place type or like by land use category, essentially, is our goal.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I imagine what it's near. Like, gosh, is it near a high frequency or potentially high frequency transit corridor? May also have a um, differing needs or pressures. Um, Josh had asked earlier, while transit's absolutely needed in high density areas, from another perspective, highly effective transit will also help promote higher density. Is that something that you guys are considering? Is that part of the city planning when you're trying to, well, he referenced density targets, but when we are looking at how to make some of these things effective, would could transit be one of the tools in that toolbox?
Yeah, we're definitely looking at both sides of the coin. Are we serving our highest density areas with transit today? Or if we're building up density in an area, how can we make sure transit's serving it? But then also where we currently have and will have high capacity transit now and in the future, making sure that that could be an opportunity for additional density. So it's both sides. And we're looking at it in both ways. So kind of like overlaying the existing transit and seeing how land use is or is not supporting it. And then if there are gaps within that, that some land use needs to be better served. And I keep referencing density in terms of residential, but it could also be density of employment, of, the working population. So it could be either.
Absolutely. And then certainly it can be a mix of those uses. We
Yeah.
know that that old traditional style of having both residents and businesses mixed together in a really walkable area is something that a lot of people are very interested in. Um, and I am curious. I imagine you guys have more data, but I saw a survey a couple of years ago about um, what people were looking for when they are choosing where they're going to live, or um, and that roughly a third of people wanted more of that single family traditional uh, uh, type of home. About a third of people wanted more of a denser, walkable, mixed use community that they wanted to live in. Another third could kind of go either way, but and that only about, at least statewide, only about 2% of the state's land was really in that dense, walkable area. Are you looking at all into kind of, obviously we need to pay a lot of attention to what the existing residents want, or if residents plan to move within the city. But are you also looking at things that may make the city more attractive, or what people are looking for as they're trying to decide where they want to go?
I think, yeah, go for it, Jar.
I think absolutely. Where we that first strategy of improving or first goal of it, improving quality of life, we feel like if we can improve the quality of life for Detroiters and make it really a great place to live, then more people will want to live here. And that will help us, you know, grow in a strategic way that then supports all these other things that we want to see happen within the city. So yes, absolutely. I think that that idea of making great places to live is a way to attract people now and into the future.
Excellent. Now that makes a lot of sense as well. Marguerite was interested in asking a question. I will invite Marguerite to ask a question, or make a comment. Great to have you join us, Marguerite.
Thank you. Thank you. My, my question is that when we all need to be more inclusive because of the walkable areas. I am I am for walkable areas, yes, but the transportation can be very limited in certain areas. And I grew up in Southwest Detroit, and this was before the riot, and we had stores, party stores, restaurants in every area where there was a rock to. And you said that there are more of 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 the district.
Thank you, Marguerite. That's a great point. If you can talk a little bit, Dara or Julie, about how you're working to make this very inclusive to ensure all parts, not just the wealthier parts of the community, but that you have walkable areas, safe, convenient places to walk. And I think Marguerite was referencing being able to just walk to a restaurant anywhere you're at. Can you say a little bit about your efforts there?
You want me to go, Julie? Yeah, okay. We're tag teaming here, so I'm just making eye contact. Who's answering? Um, yeah, I think that we recognize that all, you know, the goal number one, we want to improve quality of life in every neighborhood. So that means every neighborhood, not just the wealthy neighborhoods. We do acknowledge that it's not going to be the same, and it's not going to be the same density everywhere, because as Julie said, we are, a third of the population that we once were. But figuring out how best to serve all of the communities with and meet the needs of those communities to improve that quality of life, and identifying the kind of policies and strategies that are needed for those different neighborhoods are going to be really critical and an important part of this plan. And I think in terms of being able to walk to restaurants and things like that, we may not be able to do that in some of our really, really low density areas, but we want them to be able to maybe hop on a bus and access that, or maybe they'd be able to walk to a store, or something in their neighborhood. But those kind of high density walkable neighborhoods, they really need a lot of people in order to support those retail. And so even if we'd like them everywhere, those retail need people to spend money there, and things like that. So we're trying to find that right balance to make sure that we have enough people for those retail corridors to be successful, while also making sure that all communities have access to amenities. The access just might be a little different, or the amount of retail, or the type of retail may differ.
Excellent. Yeah, there's definitely going to be some challenges, but I like how you're looking at everybody can, every area can improve. Rachel had asked a little bit earlier, um, the Brightmore Framework Plan, during Brightmore Framework Plan, the planning department committed to developing an equity toolkit for their planning process. And you mentioned modeling off of Charlotte because they have an equity framework. Is there a specific toolkit you are using? Is that something you can share, or is that something that is still under development? Can you say more about your an equity toolkit?
I'll take the first part of that question because I was more involved in the Brightmore framework than maybe Julie was, but then I'm going to pass it to Julie to talk about this toolkit. So the Brightmore framework, I do remember that there was a request for that. It was more towards the end of the planning process. What we're really excited about in this process is from the beginning, really using the equity toolkit to inform all of the policy making, and really make sure we're identifying and addressing needs. So I'll let Julie talk about how we're framing it, and the tool that's being developed.
Yeah, sure. So we are at a point where we have a first draft of what we're calling our opportunity index. The opportunity index has three indices feeding into it. One is an equity index, which speaks to socioeconomic disparities that exist across the city, whether that relates to race and ethnicity, age, disability status, or income. Then we have a health index, which is talking about personal health outcomes and disparities in health outcomes that exist across the city. And then we have a resilience index, which speaks to disparities in environmental health that exists across our neighborhoods. Together, at this stage of the process, they're giving us, they're answering the question, are people thriving here? We don't want to just look at the data and look at market conditions and assess whether the land use is working or not. We want to pair that with an understanding of, are people thriving here or not? Where are there differences in each of those buckets that exist? And we want that to lead us to either a policy intervention. So for example, if we have a neighborhood that by all kind of objective land use metrics is off the charts performing super well, but we're seeing that people have really poor health outcomes there, that's probably indicating a need for a policy intervention for the master plan to suggest or at least highlight a need for to the, to those agencies who would be responsible for programs and initiatives to address that. In other cases where we have land use where we're like, I don't know, is this really what the future of this place is? And it's paired with different disparities that we're seeing across any of those indices, it's probably signaling to us that a different strategy might be needed altogether in terms of the land use planning. That's how we're using it in this stage. It is our hope that when the plan is finished, that we would pivot to using this tool more to guide our implementation. And I think that all and how we use it as a toolkit to inform future decision making and to inform the kind of equitable implementation of the plan is yet to be determined and requires a lot more conversation. We are working with the Civil Rights and Inclusion Office as well as our Office of Sustainability on this because we all have a shared interest in this area in how we kind of track and report out on how well people are thriving in the neighborhoods and how our different plans, projects, and initiatives can help address those disparities that exist. So it is a tool that we are building completely from scratch for the master plan, but we are drawing from a lot of best practice work that is out there. The reason we're doing that is it is pretty functional. We want to make sure that the data is publicly available, is a really as close to a gold standard source as we can get, and easy to maintain and update.
Excellent point. Josh had a question, I think a little bit about scope. I believe you had answered part that you are looking at the entire city as opposed to a more staggered approach for a specific neighborhood at a time. How do you address, if you focus on the entire city, it can be hard for an average person to see the impact. But then if you focus only on certain neighborhoods, then others feel left out. Do you have thoughts as to how you're going to help the average person really see the impact of something of this magnitude, I guess, this scale?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've recognized over the years is that without a citywide plan that's guiding decision making, you're losing impact by not being able to have really clear strategic approaches to all of the decisions that are being made on a day-to-day basis. Like with that said, we have had a lot of success with neighborhood plans, and we've done a number of neighborhood plans in the last 10 years, and those will not go away. It's our vision that we will continue to do neighborhood plans where we can really get specific on the needs and opportunities within a neighborhood and work on implementation that way. What this allows us to do is to make sure that what we're doing across neighborhoods is consistent and working, helping us to achieve that kind of overarching common vision. And yeah, it is difficult. And it's difficult to people want to talk about their specific street or their specific neighborhood. So we constantly find ourselves asking people to think about, okay, but what about the whole city? What if we think about the whole city and all of the opportunities and challenges? That said, we will be going in this next round of engagement district by district. That will give us an opportunity to start thinking more in specific geographies so that people will be able to see where they live on a map and what we're thinking about, or give us feedback based on that. And then we're always going to be saying yes, but we're also thinking much higher level than parcel by parcel, like zoning might. So I think it's always going to be both. We're always going to have a need for that more specific planning, but we're going to keep trying to get people to stick with us as we think about the citywide vision. It's also, frankly, hard to get people to think about 20 years in the future, especially when you're dealing with immediate needs today. But we still think it's really important to make sure that we have that long-term vision that we're all working towards together.
Can't believe you're not going to address my elderly neighbor's pitted sidewalk. I thought that's what this is
We'll
all
have
about.
folks with us at meetings to help answer
Okay.
the questions.
Um, we're going to take maybe two more questions, but so we can leave some time for um, a couple of true updates. I will share a couple of, I guess it's more comments or suggestions for you guys to take into account that open space and lots need to have affordable housing built. The city of Detroit needs to consider building new homes and emphasize on home ownership for those who want to own a house and live in the city and pay taxes. So that was one uh, suggestion, and also a comment with a couple of plus ones that bus benches and weatherproof bus shelters have to be prioritized by the city. Um, Several people noted how important that is. Um, More shelters at existing stops. So, um, let's see, I think the one other question that I had noted in here, um, was that a street with good transit is Michigan Ave. There have been many examples of rehabbing buildings, but there are so many empty buildings and occupied buildings that need drastic upgrading. Is that something studied in that it is a major roadway with lots of neighborhoods supporting it?
I think that's just a really good example of how challenging it is to build up that type of commercial corridor all across the city. I think that's what I would say. So Corktown is one of those areas that we do see enough density, at least in pockets, to support a commercial corridor like that. But as this person has noted, even that is struggling, and that's a near downtown neighborhood. It's seeing a lot of investment in other ways, and there's still, much more that could be done there. So it's definitely, I think it's just a really good example of just how far we have to go with the master plan, as we're talking about making sure that more neighborhoods have access to these types of places.
Excellent. Another recommendation, accessible housing. Let's make sure
Mhm.
that, I mean, it's not really affordable if people can't actually, with various disabilities, aren't able to actually access and utilize it. The um, I know that it is not explicitly within your realm, but I know that there's been a lot of interest in some zoning changes that the city is considering involving, as you noted, it's awfully hard to build and to do business in the city. So removing some of those hurdles and um, uh, are you able to share anything more about what that proposal is and or where it is in the process?
Yeah, so it's kind of a parallel process. Like I mentioned, Zone Detroit started before Plan Detroit did, and we're kind of working to bring the processes together. And this is one piece that's being kind of like brought forward on a quicker timeline. Um, I believe it was referred back to PED, so the Planning and Economic Development Committee for next week, for discussion. And I think for consideration to go to formal city council. I don't know the dates. It'll depend on how it does in PED.
Excellent. Well, I will share our 2 cents in that True's pretty excited about the potential, the idea of relaxing some of the really strict zoning requirements in some areas that have been such a constraint on new housing, allowing I don't know if Joel wants to hop on and share a little more about this, but allowing more multi-unit housing, duplexes, townhomes, reducing the amount of off-street parking needed. Joel, yeah, if you want to share anything about that, I think this would be a great opportunity.
Yeah, so as folks may have heard, separate from the Plan Detroit process, the city is also looking at relaxing some zoning requirements in the near term. Uh, Taking areas that are already zoned for multifamily housing, for duplexes, which comprises a lot of the older areas of the city, kind of a middle area, not the downtown core, but some of the sort of areas. Well, it's hard to explain without a map, but um, basically, the proposal would allow slightly higher densities, including not only duplexes, but 3 unit houses and quads and townhomes in those R2 zoned areas. So, making it easier to build multifamily housing in more areas of the city, as well as relaxing the requirements for parking, allowing just 0.75 parking spaces per new housing unit, instead of, I believe it's, what is it right now? 1 point?
1 or 1.5? I can't
Yeah, I think
remember.
it's 1 or 1.5.
Yeah, again, zoning's
Where,
not necessarily our expertise, but as noted, a lot of this stuff is interrelated. So this seemed like a good step.
yeah. So, yeah, True is strongly supporting those changes as steps towards a more walkable and more transit friendly city. So I encourage folks to check out the link in the chat, and if you agree with our position, to actually email and call your city council members in favor of this proposal.
Absolutely. As I noted earlier, there's often a lot of pushback from people who don't want anything to change. But this is a very modest proposal, and that would be a good step in the right direction. And if it doesn't move in the next month through city council, um, there with a new mayor coming in, it may not happen for another year or more. So we really hope that the city council can get moving um, with this modest step, to make it a little bit easier to build more housing, and a little less parking. So, um, well, thank you so much, Dara, Julie, both for the incredible work you're doing, delving into such detail on what's happening in the city, all and really the efforts to listen to so many differing voices across the city, and find that balance with how we can help the city move forward. We are going to stay on for a few more minutes and provide a couple of updates on True activities, but a big thank you again, Dara and Julie. Any closing remarks or things that you guys want to share before you go?
I just wanted to say thanks for having us. This was really great for us. We appreciate all your questions and feedback. Please do sign up for our newsletter so that you can stay informed, and find out about that next round of district engagements. We are going to be having a meeting in every district, and it's really an opportunity to get even more specific feedback. I know, again, we were talking high up here on policies, but we'll be able to get even more specific feedback from you all in those meetings. So please do sign up. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so
Thanks.
much. Very, very much appreciated there. Um, and while we have folks on, I want to give a couple of quick updates. I believe many people heard we had a pretty exciting win at the state budget level. The state budget overall was kind of a mixed bag. There were some not so great things in it, but our years of consistent advocacy telling the state that they really need to invest more in transit and support all 77 transit agencies across the state and the three ferry systems that all depend on local bus operating funds. We were successful. There was $160 million more in the state budget for public transit per year um, that uh, most of a larger portion of that will go specifically into the local bus operating funds that allow for the service that we depend on every single day to exist. So in some ways, it's not necessarily a huge leap forward, but it's a restoration of much needed funding and prevents major cuts that many agencies were worried they might have to make. And there's going to be a new fund. The exact details still need to be worked out, but we're told it will invest in transformational transit projects, about 65 million a year for the next 5 years. Now that needs to be divided across the state, and there's a lot of different uh, interests and pressures, but we're excited to push for things like why is there no express bus between Detroit, Lansing, and Grand Rapids? It's you can technically get there on transit with like three different transfers and 3 hours, but there's no reason that the state couldn't invest um, a few $1 million, which in state budget dollars is nothing, to make sure we can actually get directly from our biggest city to our state capital, even if you don't drive. So it could go into any number. So state of exciting new projects. So stay tuned. We will be watching that closely and exploring how we can help shape how that is going and how to make sure that those investments are coming up. So a little bit more on that in the chat here. The other piece, the other thing that's coming up very, very soon is the election. Detroit's got a very important city election. We'll have our first new mayor in 12 years. There's some very important city council races. True does not endorse or oppose any particular candidates, but we want you to be informed. So we asked the candidates several specific questions about what they would do for transit, both their commitments to help invest in transit, to be a leader across the region, and so so I strongly urge everyone, all Detroiters, before you cast your ballot in the over the next 2 weeks, to review what the candidates said that they'll do. There's some great input from a lot of candidates, and we're excited. Um, hmm. We'll see. Yes, thank you, Mary Jo. There's a lot of other good information out. Obviously, transit's not the only issue, but vote411.org, League of Women Voters has a lot of great information as well. But if you're a Detroiter and haven't already cast your absentee ballot, make sure you've got a plan to vote in the very near future. Joel, other updates that you want to offer before we wrap up tonight?
Um, question. This this is Marguerite Malak speaking. Um, the 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 um
The questionnaire?
no now the information that Joe and you sent in the chat box are blocked.
Hmm. I'm sorry to hear that. Again, we're able to access them just fine. If others can check and see if you're able to access those. If not, I'll ask Joel to follow up with you afterwards and
Okay,
make sure that you're able to access all of that information, and of course, make sure that it's not a an error on our side. So, thank you for alerting us to that. We'll follow up and make sure. Um,
okay. Thank you.
thank you. Um, Joel, any other updates or announcements that you wanted to share?
I'll just note that True is continuing to push for higher wages for DDOT workers in order to provide better transit service. And we're hearing that the mayor is accelerating negotiations with the DDOT unions in pursuit of that goal. And definitely still encourage folks to give the mayor a call and tell them that you support higher wages for DDOT workers.
Absolutely. Not only because it's the right thing to do for them to have not only living wages, but competitive wages. So, and it's the right thing for us as riders to make sure that there's a consistent, reliable, well-trained workforce fixing those buses, driving those buses, et cetera. So, some huge bravo to Joel and our partners at Detroit Disability Power, Warriors on Wheels, Detroit People's Platform, and others who've been really pushing to make sure our drivers get get good competitive wages. Um, we do have, oh, I'm not sure if it's gotten onto the calendar yet, but our next Transit Tuesday in November, we are going to talk statewide transit. That idea I mentioned about an express bus across the state, what sort of bus service exists to connect between communities, and what's the state doing to improve the rail service? There was obviously a lot of buzz about adding a new multimodal transit center, um, a train bus depot right next to the Michigan Central station with potential connections to Windsor. There's an exciting study about can we get a train that runs north-south all the way up to the Traverse City and Petoskey area? Why can't people who don't personally drive get conveniently up north and vice versa? So we've got an exciting report we're going to be sharing shortly that really looks at statewide transit, and it's going to be a chance to kind of introduce True is working with partner groups around the state to develop a new statewide coalition focused on improving, ensuring everybody, not just across Metro Detroit, but across the state, has affordable, reliable access to clean, sustainable transportation wherever we want to go. So, um, watch for that. Oops, I just had it. What date is that? November 18th. The information on that should be coming out. Is that right? Yes, should be coming out very shortly. We're also going to have our holiday party in December, where we celebrate all of our amazing volunteers, and we invite all of our members and volunteers and supporters to come out. I believe that's going to be Thursday evening, November 11th. Um, and then, or sorry, Thursday evening, December 11th for our holiday party. Um, and then the state of transit is just around the corner. Well, along a really, really long corner, but make sure you hold January 27th for what may be the biggest state of transit event ever. So thank you so much for everyone who joined on. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you, Zanaya, for helping put this great event together. Joel, for your engagement. And we're always open to ideas and suggestions for the other types of Transit Tuesday talks and events that we want to do. So please share your ideas and suggestions, and feel free to reach out to any of us at any point in time. And have a great night.